All right, welcome everybody. I'm Brian Douglas, and I'm here from GitHub, and we're going to talk about GitHub. So I'm going to actually show my screen again, and yeah. So if you wandered in here and you sort of RSVP'd, looks like quite a few people are rolling in right now too, which is pretty cool. Yeah, you wandered in here trying to get tips for how to use GitHub in regards to open source. You're in the right place. If you came to the wrong place, stick around. You'll probably learn something too as well. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I think the best way to go about this is if you have never used GoToWebinar, there's a place somewhere on the sidebar, the nav or sorry, the operational bar, where you can ask questions. All questions are valid, so please ask them. I will stop to answer them mid talk. So like if you asked a question, if you have a question about something you see on the slide, like what this logo is, if you've never seen it before, ask the question. But I think the best way to start this too as well, if you could drop in the chat and to say where you're sort of calling in from, just so I know there are other people on the other end of this thing. I've been inside my house for the past 6 months, so it's nice to know other people out there. But let's just jump in there. Cool. So we got San Diego, Canada, Nigeria. Wow, excellent. It works. It works. It works so well that I have to increase the bar. Cool. Boulder. All right. Yeah. Puerto Rico. All right. I'm just kind of blown away at some of these places too as well. So I'm super excited that everybody's coming through from Scotland, India. Okay. Wow. Some people are staying up late for this, which I appreciate that. So top 5 tips for open source projects. That should have said for contributing open source projects. I don't know what happened there, how it got deleted, but bear with me. First day on the new webinar. I work for this small company. It's a small startup embedded inside of Microsoft. It's called GitHub. And we are a collaboration platform to connect developers across the world. And like what I said, collaborating through code. And if I'm gonna save the joke of like raise your hand if you ever heard of GitHub, because I'm pretty sure you have heard of GitHub. So but if you haven't heard of GitHub, we have been shipping a lot of features in the last year or so. A little more than a year. The past couple of years, we've been shipping a lot of features. So many that it's probably hard to keep up. So if you're an experienced GitHub user, or if you're brand new, there's a chance there's probably something in this talk that you've never heard of or seen. And if you have seen all this stuff, consider giving this talk next year. But speaking of features, I can't talk about features without talking about the person who does the best job on features, which is Beyonce. Earlier this summer, via TikTok and Twitter, Beyonce launched a feature with Megan Thee Stallion, which is called Savage. Amazing song. She actually shipped this while sheltering in place in Houston, which is kind of mind-blowing, to be quite honest. But yeah, in the thick of it, this is like the legit. Someone actually asked a question, how can we get access to VS Code? Oh, Codespaces on GitHub. Sign up for the beta. And then best way to do it is sign up for the beta. So you have to confirm you've done that and then reach out to me, which you'll find out how to do that later. All right, so I talk about Beyonce because Beyonce is a superstar. She has a lot of people who follow her in her Beehive, or the Beehive. And I say that because GitHub has 50 million developers worldwide. So my job, which I'm a Beyonce advocate, which I converted this over to Google Slides. Everything about this is kind of awkward, but bear with me. But yeah, I'm a Beyonce advocate at GitHub. I'm really a developer advocate, and my focus is really to go to bat for the Hive, which is the other pun that I was gonna roll into. Jokes are hard today, but yeah. So I go to bat for the Hive. So people who are looking for Codespace access or just getting knowledge on GitHub in general, like I'm that person for you. I'm your friend inside of GitHub. So please be my friend. But I'm going to move away from Beyonce because I really came to really just talk about features. Like I said, if you have questions about anything I bring it up, ask them now and I'll answer them when they come up too as well. And if you want to wait till the end, we got about 35 slides, 40 slides of content, and I'm happy to take questions at the end too as well. But I'm just going to roll right in, which is going to be talking about the top features for open source projects in making contributions. So these are tips, and the first one's going to be the contributing MD. Now, if you have not done this, so if you've been part of Hacktoberfest in the past couple weeks and you have not navigated your way into a contributing MD, you definitely want to start doing that, because there's always going to be some hard-hitting facts and ways to contribute in the projects inside the contributing MD. So things that are nuanced, getting your developer environment set up, things to understand like what is the proper etiquette for assigning an issue or grabbing an issue for you to work on. It all lives within a contributing MD. So this one is my contributing MD for my project. Right off the bat, I like to take up a link to the code of conduct, because I want to make it very clear that there are certain ways to ask questions and certain ways to interact in my projects that I deem acceptable, and there are certain ways that are not acceptable. I've been on the fence of actually removing the question why, or even having the word why in response to issues or response to pull requests, because I think that's kind of sometimes going to be very hard language in the English language, asking why did you do this or why did you do that. Instead, providing solutions and stuff like that, like did you think of doing this way, or did you know that this existed? Like those type of, that's actually not a good question either, but I leave that sort of context of how I expect operating in my project inside the contributing MD. There's another very popular open source maintainer who has a very strict contributing MD that if you don't read it, your PR actually gets closed automatically. And I've got a story that I can share later too as well of how I leveraged contributing MD to contribute to a Go project, and how that saved me from getting my contribution merged versus it getting closed automatically. So I'll bring that up. Actually, I'll bring it up now. It's the project itself, it's a GitHub CLI, and in that project, it's maintained by GitHub employees that I don't work with directly, but because the amount of frequency that they get requests for features and issues, they ask that people don't open PRs directly to the project without first telling them there's a problem, because there's a good chance that if you found the problem, someone else did too, and they're able to co-locate all that data. But if someone opens a PR all for the same problem, it could be challenging. So I say all that because read the contributing MD. It's like definitely the gateway. The README is the gateway into projects, but the contributing MD always has a context that is necessary for being successful and getting your PRs merged. So I'm kind of racing through this too as well. Linked issues is something that is it good to use these tips for closed source projects? And honestly, having consistency within the way you operate your project is hands down, yes. Closed source, private projects, if you work with more than one person or more than just yourself, I highly recommend you leverage these tips within those projects. The context of this is open source, but the GitHub, technically, the way we expect people to use it in closed source and open source is really the same, to be quite honest. But I did want to talk about linked issues. So this is actually a issue that, actually no, this is a PR. This is what throwing me off, because it's the title of the issue that was created is throwing me off. But what I'm getting at is this is a PR that was opened by someone during Hacktoberfest. So this was opened, what was it, 2 days ago? It was I think it was like Friday, either Friday or Saturday. But this person actually came through. This is their second PR they opened up on my project. And you can see they've done some really clear things that I enjoy, that actually is called out in my contributing MD, which is linking your issues. Now, if you didn't know about linked issues, here in the left box, it's got this code, which is called fixes. So fixes, closes, fix, close, those are all keywords directly linked. You can find that out about in the GitHub documentation. But linked issues, so GitHub issues are GitHub issues. Linked issues are issues that you link inside of a pull request. So it's nothing different than a GitHub issue. It actually is a GitHub issue. The difference is that I can actually look on the right bar here, and I can see there's an issue that's attached to this PR. Now, I have a very hard stance, especially during October, that if you open a PR in my project and there's no issue attached to it, I cannot accept your PR, mainly because of the amount of frequency that I get of people who want to contribute to my project. I don't have time to go through and try to figure out if this project is legitimate or this feature is legitimate for my project. I would rather have a conversation in the issue if the feature actually it makes sense, or if this is indeed an issue that matters. Some things that I've found is like sometimes linting, or sometimes the way people use WebStorm, like all those different things that you have to embed into your projects. Sometimes I don't really want in my project, so my preference is to leave all that stuff, this sort of distinction of how you write your code outside of my project, and then we could move forward with just making the sort of project work. So linked issues are literally that's what it is. You're just linking an issue inside of a PR. And the way you do that is either you can go to the linked issues in the right sidebar here, which is this, I don't know if you can see my mouse, to be quite honest. Yeah, it looks like you can. But yeah, this whole right sidebar, which is called links issues, you can link an issue here manually, or you can use the short code to actually link the issue. This is super helpful too, to be able to track and see if there are issues actually ready to be closed. What happens is when I merge that issue itself will get closed when the PR gets merged, which I'll do. Actually, I can't merge that one. I actually had a fix that I wanted him to make, but I planned on merging it. We'll see if he actually updated it. But you can see this is an issue I've had open since June 13th. That was actually picked up during Hacktoberfest. And another thing I like to do is also I like to assign issues. So if you're already linking your issue, the assumption is that you've already assigned yourself to the issue, which is something that I'll get into in a moment. So I'll take a pause to answer any questions too as well. How can one find a project that would be easy for a new contributor? You know, I'll say that for the end. I think there's a lot of tools out there for you to answer that question. But maybe we'll do a quick tour through how I would find projects to contribute to. So this one's called multi-line suggested changes. Now, this was supposed to be a GIF, but it looks like it's just an image. So I'm not sure why Google Slides broke that. And this is literally my first time in a long time using Google Slides. So apologies for not really doing the proper QA before going live. But you know, we got to start somewhere, right? But this is me actually doing. You can actually do suggested changes directly in line inside of your code. This is helpful, and the way you do this is you just highlight the line, and then you could. That's unfortunate too as well. My entire GIF is gone, which I do have a keynote with this on. Here we go. Here it is. So what I'll do is I'll just show you my the GIF in Keynote because I was trying not to use Keynote, and instead I will. Otherwise, all the context lives here. So this is me showing the GIF of doing suggested changes. The biggest deal here is that I'm writing comments just like I would normally do. You can do multi-line comments, but then I'm actually clicking this box here at the plus minus, and I'm actually adding a suggestion of code. So now from here, I can actually take this code and commit it directly into the branch as well as the PR. What people have normally done in the past, if they usually have to go all the way to like forking, not forking, they need to clone the branch that the PR was made on to actually make suggestions to those changes. But the beauty of this is that you can actually make changes directly in line. So if you made a spelling mistake or if you made like a minute change that you would have to normally go back to your command line or your GitHub desktop to make that change, you can actually do it directly in the browser. Consult the docs for a better explanation too as well. I've actually recorded a video on that too as well, which exists on YouTube, but I think if you just search for multi-line suggested changes, you can actually get more context in that. The other thing I wanted to mention was save replies. Now this is more so on the maintainer side, but it is beneficial if you're going into a project as a contributor as well, is actually saving replies. What I like to do is when people open up contributions to my project and maybe they missed something or it's very clear that they didn't read the documentation or the contributing MD, I have this nice little save reply here, which is called the contributing MD. So if I know they need to review the contributing MD, I have a save reply that says, please read the contributing MD to learn how to assign yourself to issues. I have one for, well, I have the contributing MD for assigning, and then I have the contributing MD for, hey, thanks for your PR, but could you also read the contributing MD? So these are things that I have to respond to on a regular basis with this sort of detail. So like if someone opens a PR and they're missing a description, they're missing a linked issue, they don't have a screenshot if something visual has changed, I have a save reply just to respond back to them rather quickly, but with also with low effort. And honestly, this is actually one, you can see this is my save reply here. So I deleted some other stuff, but for the person who asked about the linked issues, here's the documentation on all the keywords that you can use for linking issues as well. And I linked this directly to my save reply as well. And it's a good way to respond back and get like instant feedback, like positive feedback, because Jerry's able to respond back and say it's all done, and I was able to merge this. Also, this is another PR. I literally just merged 13 hours ago as part of Hacktoberfest as well. So yeah, you can see he's he didn't have a description. He did miss on linking the issue, but I let that slide too as well because I chatted with him in the Discord, which I wanted to get into in my next tip, which would be the triage role. Now, this is something that not a lot of people are aware of, and I feel like there's a lot of push, especially Hacktoberfest is great because you get a lot of push for contributions, but there's a contribution that I find invaluable to my project. So this is my project I've been talking about, OpenSauce, and what I have is I have a triage team, and I have a triage team for the very reason that I know people want to contribute to the project, but my project's built on React. It's built on Create React App. It's built on GraphQL. It's also built using Netlify and deploying that way. So it's a Jamstack site. So there's a lot of context that you might not have if you come from another programming background or another, I guess, practices that I don't expect you to have up front. So I created a triage role because this role is a way for you to learn how to do contributions in the project, but by also giving back to the project right away. So whenever there's a PR opened, the first thing I usually do, if it's something that needs more than just my eyes on it, I actually mention the triage team. So you can see these are the majority of the triage team right here. I had a call out for folks that said, hey, would you like to join the triage team? This is what you get out of it. You get access to me. I can pair with you and teach you on the basics of React and everything else. What I ask in return is that whenever there's a PR that is opened, I ask that you review it, help reviewing it. So if you look back into this PR that I have opened, this one doesn't have any visual changes, but for the sake of explanation, within my PR and my content, my CI, I have a link to the live version of the site. And the biggest thing that people can do to help me out is actually log in and use the site and check to see if the feature works. So a lot of times I get features that I didn't build myself. For example, there's a feature here for, this is a, that's an issue I know about, but this is a feature of creating forks directly within my project. These are forks on GitHub. Someone created this feature, and by triaging it, by my triage team going through it, we were able to find out that there was a bug in the feature, and we were able to make sure the bug was, addressed right away. So that's the triage team. Highly recommend to look at projects to look at projects that actually the audio and video are working on there to give us a try. Okay. Yeah, so basically I'm getting at is look at projects to see if they have a triage team, if they have a reviewer team. It's like pretty paramount to actually provide this sort of help in context within projects, mainly because projects need extra push and they need extra help and, like, I guess, quote unquote staff or people to support I guess the reviewing of code, reviewing to see if issues themselves are indeed issues. Also, whenever I ship a new release, I always ask my triage team to go through and run through it to see if there's anything they find that is buggy, because that's an opportunity to find good first issues as well. And usually the triage team are usually the first people to grab issues too as well to contribute to. So for small projects, could a README section be an alternative to contributing MD? Absolutely yes. Yeah, so my contributing MD in the context of my project, it is bigger than the README. So if you look at my README, I've already got a section for contributing, but then I quickly tell you to go to the contributing guide, mainly because I want this to be digestible and you can get the whole context of the README without being overwhelming. So if you don't want to know about how to run the site locally, but you just want to learn about the background of the project, like, you can get that. And you can see also clicking through here as well. So this is all context that would pretty much overwhelm the entire README the way I have it structured. So yeah, good question. Is a triage, sorry, how about adding filters for IDE editor specific stuff, project get ignore? Not a great contribution. Now, if everybody happens to switch over to using WebStorm and you need to add stuff to the get ignore, that is fine. But usually I ask for folks to give me a contribution of one of these things. So like, I guess the real question is, if you want to add stuff for specific IDE and filtering for stuff in projects, why not grab one of these good first issues instead? Which at the moment, well, we've kind of ran through the majority of mine. So at the moment, we just have one good first issue up for grabs. But what I'm getting at is there already issues that I want to be worked on the project. You could add IDE specific filtering into stuff to get ignore as a contribution, as long as you do one of these things. I would prefer first, because there's a good chance that maybe you use, I keep saying WebStorm because it comes to mind, but if you use anything else like TextMate or anything like that, if you're using those specific IDEs, there's a good chance that you might do that contribution and never come back. So then that contribution was for nothing. So if you are invested and want to contribute to this project to make it better, then I would say yes, go for it. But if you're just looking to make that as a contribution, it's not really valid, because I'll tell you right now, the majority of my contributors use VS Code. Mainly, I only know that because I don't use VS Code. So the most of the learning I learn about VS Code is through the contributors that I have on this project. So I would prefer you to give me like a real contribution that is already opened here. And I think I have, oh, I just missed it, Hacktoberfest issues too as well. And the way I've structured my project too as well, and this is like not so much, it's a tip, but it's more of insight the way I'm doing it. And I learned this from Blitz.js, is that I have good first issues, but then I have Hacktoberfest issues. And I've actually purposely made Hacktoberfest issues not good first issues, because I already have a structure for that. Hacktoberfest issues, I expect them to be a little harder, because if I made everything easy, then I don't technically need a ton of more contributors on the project, but what I need is more people who want to hang out and be part of my community. So my goal is to, like, I already have 34 contributors. Like, I want people in the community. I don't just want people to come through and use this project as a way to have one more PR towards Hacktoberfest. And this is my personal, I guess, reasons, which I know is not conducive to like just simply getting people like 4 PRs. But yeah, my goal is that I want you, during Hacktoberfest, I want to entice you to stick around. So my Hacktoberfest issues are specifically, they're for that. They're for you to have a conversation with me, which, well, let me do my last pick, because I keep trying to avoid my last pick, which is GitHub Actions. Because I'm gonna spend most of my time, the rest of the time, talking about GitHub Actions, if you don't mind. Is a triage team a good introduction to participating and contributing? The answer is yes. And it's not, quite honestly, there's not a lot of projects that are using the triage role / team. It's something I noticed that Express.js was using, and I've seen some projects start to pick it up. I've done my part in trying to encourage other people to use this as well, because I think it's a great opportunity to bring more people in the fold and have opportunity for mentorship into contributing to projects. So I use it, and I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more projects in this couple of years using it as well. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question. And I think I got all the questions so far. So feel free to ask any questions at this point, because I'm going to spend the rest of the time doing GitHub Actions that will hopefully, this last section is literally like 10 tips, but I can conjoined it into one. So GitHub Actions. So GitHub Actions is now if you're looking for low effort opportunities to contribute to code, GitHub Actions might be one of them. It might include some context that is needed, but I'll tell you what one of the contributions I got like a month ago that was pretty low effort, because all you had to do was copy and paste. But workflow automation, it's a way for you to leverage the GitHub API to automate parts of the developer workflow that are redundant. So GitHub Actions was shipped 2.5 years ago, actually 2 years ago. Sorry, I'm trying to do my math. Yeah, it's 2 years ago in August. And it's a tool to basically automate your workflow from idea to production. There are repetitive tasks that you do on a regular basis. So like one of the tasks that I do is I take a pull request. I review pull requests once a day. I try not to do it multiple times a day because I've got other things to do. So if I'm going to review pull requests once a day, I want to automate the process of me being able to provide feedback really quickly so I can get to the rest of the pull requests and then move on to like my day job. So I bring this up because there's a sport called basketball, which that's not meant to be condescending. I do realize that we do have people across the globe who are watching this who might not be fans of basketball. So basketball is a sport primarily really popular in the U.S., but it's also big in Europe as well. It's actually big in a lot of places, even in South America and certain countries. But what I'm getting at is in basketball, the sport, the object of the game is to get the ball in the opposing team's hoop and score that goal. Usually there's a 5-on-5, so you have 5 players in each team. And there's this concept of full court layups where the one teammate could take the ball in at the start of the play and could take it directly to the hoop without negating the rest of the team. It's not the best way to play basketball. Like if you have a really bad team, I get it. But it's the same thing with coding and programming. It's better with a team. It's great to be a cowboy coder, and which is a term it's not as widely used, but apologies that context is lost. But you could be the person who does all the code or does all the work to score goals or ship features, but when you have 4 other people standing around, you're not actually leveraging the proper tools. So what I'm getting at is in basketball, so this is I didn't mention, but this is a basketball court. The structure, so this is just half of the court. They leverage statistics to figure out there was an area on the basketball court that was 31% of the shots made from this point go in, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have 5 other people on the opposing team also trying to prevent you from shooting that in, it actually makes a big difference to the point where you could optimize to make sure your plays or your automation is optimized to make sure the ball gets to that point, and then that's when you shoot. So I bring this up because there's things like continuous integration, continuous deployment, things that help your developer workflow to be automated, that things that you should be leveraging. And there's a lot of opportunity. So I'd mentioned identifying repeated task that you can like do reviewing a pull request once a day, like make sure you optimize around that time where you actually sit down and do that review. Same thing with triaging. Optimize the time that you spent triaging issues, automate portions of that. So what I've done with Save Replies is I've automated myself from constantly trying to think, this person forgot to do this. I'm just going to automate actually responding without me even doing the Save Replies. I'm just automate that reply being responded to if there's no linked issues. So I bring this up because there's this little tool called GitHub Script. GitHub Script, it's built by the GitHub Actions team, and it allows you to write JavaScript directly within the YAML inside of the repo. And I'll get into more details of how I do this, but we had this thing called the GitHub Hackathon early this year. It's a website powered by a GitHub repo, and I've literally the repo itself is all the stuff you see on there. So the way we actually did feature submissions, so if you submitted an action for the hackathon, the way we decided to feature them is, this is GitHub Script, the repo, but the way we decided to feature them was we use an action. So if you look at the last 5 lines, that's JavaScript code. Everything above in the purple and above is actually YAML. So I was able to write JavaScript code to merge pull request based on the pull request number that was submitted. Now, zooming out a bit, and this is a little more complicated, so apologies if this goes over people's heads. Feel free to stop me and ask questions because I know this is getting into a denser part than the first 10 slides. So I'm happy to reiterate. There's a quote by Stan Lee, which it says, imagine every issue is someone's first issue. So this might be the first time you've ever seen JavaScript or seen actions or any of this stuff. So I'm happy to slow down and re-explain this. But what I'm getting at is the way we would do submissions is when you submit on the website, it would open up a pull request, and that pull request would then show up in my list. Actually, it would show up on my phone because I have the GitHub app, and I would actually just sit there and look at it and say, okay, I've got this many people to review, so I'm going to go through, and the only thing I would do, because at this point we leverage GitHub Actions to automate reviewing the PRs, so they would check your repo that you submitted and check to see if it was an action, and check to see if it did have a README, and check to see if they did follow the instructions. So all that was automated through the submission process. So at this point, I would just go on my phone and add a label. So I had 2 choices. Actually, I had 3 choices. 1, if it was invalid, I would put invalid. 2, if it was featured, I would put featured, and that's what actually puts it on the screen here. So if it was featured, it gets put on the homepage. If it wasn't featured, I would just put good. and the good would basically merge the pull request without featuring it. And that's pretty much all I had to do for the entire, 400 submissions that we had during the hackathon for the 4 weeks we did it. That's how we did the process. And you could see when I added the label, as soon as I add the label, the actions automates and it actually merges that PR for me. So all I'm doing is adding labels. And this is something that Kubernetes does pretty well. A lot of other large projects as well, they use labels to automate certain things inside of their review process. So I bring this up because the majority of GitHub actions, especially all these, are all open source. So I don't think I've seen a lot of actions get a lot of contributions. I'm actually not sure if a lot of actions actually even opted into Hacktoberfest, but there's a lot of opportunity to contribute to some of these actions because some of these actions are highly used and they only created in February, so they're actually pretty brand new because February is when we had the actions hackathon. So I bring this up because I leverage actions to run a GitHub Actions hackathon and using automation as well. If all this was over your head, I have a YouTube video series called Get Action Traction, where I go into the basics. So that I do have a video that's adding GitHub Actions to your node projects. I have 3 other videos and another one coming out hopefully in the next day or so on debugging actions. If you have questions about actions, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to, peel back the onion and actually explain how this automation could be pretty paramount to your developer career. But I bring this up because of automation, and I wanted to. I have a repo too as well. So if you have ideas, open up an issue and Get Action Traction to the MyBDugie handle. Also, shout out to the Twitch, the GitHub Twitch. I was gonna try to naturally transition to shouting that out, but I'm just gonna force it right here. I also want to bring up that there are lab.github.com courses. So if there's an intro or context about GitHub that you want to get, but that you just aren't quite grasping, we do have how to be a fast learner. The answer, there's a question in the chat about how to be a fast learner. I think that's a legitimate question, and the legitimate answer is to learn how to learn, which is what I really stand by. If you learn how to search, if you learn how to Google, if you learn how to find yourself in the Stack Overflow and find the right question, the right answer, that's how you be a fast learner. So this is not the end because we roughly have 30 minutes. So I'm going to go through some actions, go through some automation. I'm going to actually walk through my project, but these are my social handles, GitHub right there. Then I have my Twitter. Feel free. If you have a question here, now is the time to ask questions. Password 1. Hopefully that was not your real password. All that context, Susan. Anyway, so these are my handles. If you have any questions outside of this or you want to follow up on my project, I was going to go into my project and walk through the PR I'm actually sitting on right now and walk through linked issues, walk through contributing and sort of what I do. But first, what I wanted to really point out real quick is one of the actions I have built because I just came off talking about actions and using labels to do that. The way I manage my project as an open source maintainer is I want to treat the first time contributor as a VIP member of the community. So as soon as you open up a contribution inside the project, you automatically get this. You get this GitHub action bot that responds back and says, hey, congrats on making your first PR. Thanks for taking the time to improve open source. Say hello by joining the Discord. So this is a legit tip too as well. If you went to discord.com/open source, if you are not connecting to the community directly and introducing yourself, you're doing it wrong. Like having connections to one of these communities by saying hello, making friends is hands down the best way to get mentorship, hands down the best way to advance your career. Imagine you're working as a QA engineer and you're trying to break into front-end web development. These are front-end web development projects. At least Beautify, we've got Reason, we've got Redux, Relay, GraphQL sort of. These are front-end projects that you could actually join those communities and join the conversation there. And then what's going to happen is, and this is why I push people to join the Discord from this little bot, is because I want them to make friends with me so that way I can provide valuable feedback on their contributions. But also, like what happened here was Jerry, he made a mistake because he didn't have a description. He just opened up a PR with no context. So I was able to, one, tell him to join the Discord, And then I was able to actually go in the Discord, which I'm not going to show you, but I was able to go directly to Jerry and say, hey, thanks for the PR. But I'm not going to put it in the comments, but like you kind of missed a contributing MD. I have my generic response here, but it's like pretty important that you respond to the PR and fix those issues, or else the rest of the triage team is going to mark it invalid, because we want to make sure that people are doing it the right way, and the best way to do it is by reading and contributing MD, reading the comments that are left. But I wanted to show you also real quick how this works too as well, because the way this works is we're not using GitHub script, but using an action that was already built and open sourced. So if you look here, I've got some YAML. If this is not clear, I do have some videos that I already shared on how you can understand how this is all working. But right off the bat, I'm using this project, which is the first interaction action. The way this works is that this is an open source repo. Again, open source being the keyword. And this open source repo is now being embedded into my automation on my project. So here you go. Let's give that a star because I haven't done that yet. So I'm doing that, and then I'm using other stuff that's copy and pasted from the documentation. That's literally what Lit Latte did. He actually helped out with this. He was able to make this. He's actually the one that actually got this over the hurdle and got it to work. Copy and pasted it. We added a nice little message so that way folks are aware that there are humans that are here. The humans live in Discord, so please join the Discord. And that's the goal. This is all we've done. We added this one welcome new contributor action. Now, I wouldn't go around to all these. I wouldn't go around and ask all these projects to add this into their repos, but there is opportunity for you to like go into Discord and say, hey, would it be cool to have a welcome contributor bot by doing this? Here's an example of it working. Like that would be a legitimate contribution. And going back to the question around IDE stuff, I would prefer someone to ask me personally in the Discord about the IDE choices and how to add those to the Gitignore than to get a blind PR that just adds stuff that has no context. We did have some questions. Please also suggest tips and tricks for beginners on how to contribute to open source. Yes. Tips and tricks. Oh, let me get to that 1.6. There are so many new features in GitHub that overwhelm you ever. For me, no. There's a lot of features in GitHub, but I'd say the majority of the features that I use are the ones that I need. So there's no need for folks to try to learn every single corner of GitHub. I would say GitHub is kind of like the maybe the bad analogy, Swiss Army knife. It's basically like your utensil drawer in your kitchen. Like sometimes you need a spoon, sometimes you need a fork, sometimes you need a knife. But there's no reason to have a spoon, fork, and knife in every single meal unless you just look into wash dishes. So my intention in that statement is that use what you need for the time, and then move forward. I have no idea. True passwords are going away. I don't know. Not sure. I assume for GitHub. That I have no idea. I'll say going back to beginners on open source tips. So I ran through 5 tips for things to look out in the projects. So if I was walking into my project, and we'll just use my project example. First step, if you're looking to make contributions in projects, the best thing you can do is open up the project you're using and see what projects are listed here and contribute to those projects, because those are projects that you're depending on in your projects for work or your projects for your tutorials and or projects you're learning on in your boot camps or college courses. So first step is check out what dependencies you're using, and that's a good place to start. The second thing that I always tell people to do, if they've never used this project, to actually use this project, which sounds redundant, but I get a lot of contributions to OpenSauce that for people who have never actually even opened up the web page. So simply quick login if you're cool with that, and use the project. So the project itself is meant to capture your thoughts and contributions. So I'm working on a contribution to Node.js, and I just keep notes here. So I can type notes on the project that I'm trying to contribute to. I can actually track issues. So that's what this is. Now, I guarantee you this project itself is not actually useful for the majority of the people on the call right now. But if you had ideas for features, so the majority of these features, literally this entire sidebar, was actually contributions by people who weren't me. And it's really people who pointed out, hey, it would be cool. Wouldn't it be cool if you had this? Here's like the best contribution I got from a contributor, which let me see if I can refresh. There we go. So this bar right here was a contribution by somebody who wasn't me. So this bar not only tells me the last PR that was merged, it tells me the current version of OpenSauce that's out there. It also gives me the latest version of React that's actually installed. So there's a newer version of React that I could actually get an update for. It tells me the time to render, tells me the page load. Now this is something I was not looking for. It also tells me how many users I have too as well, and then rate limiting because we're using GitHub API. This is not something that I was looking to add, but it was something that someone saw value and asked me, is it okay if they can add this? So they opened up an issue, which I could probably find the issue, but it's probably buried. They opened up issue. We talked about it, talked about how we could approach it. I gave him literally all the code snippets that I knew of to make all this stuff work, which was all in GraphQL because GraphQL is what powers this application. And he went and built it, and now it's merged in the project. So I guess what I'm getting at is just by simply using the project, it doesn't have to be this. Like there are so many other projects that have a UI. There's so many other projects that are libraries that you could embed and actually just try out. Hands down, to answer the questions from Shrey and the other questions about tips for finding projects that are good for open source, new open source contributors, contribute to the projects you actually use is hands down the best way to do it. And if you don't know, if you aren't using any projects, then that's clearly an opportunity for you to go learn something and then contribute back to it. The best contributions I've had are from people who have never used OpenSauce before and had either a bad experience or had a very unique experience that we were able to push into a new feature. There's so many features. Oh, actually, not for me, wow. Can you share here the links to the page that you're showing us? I think, oh, you know what? I guess so. I don't know if I can, so I can send, oh, you know what? I can send answers. Excellent. So what was I can send answers to specific questions, but for the links in general, that might be painful. Actually, let me just share the slides, and then that way we can change to anyone with the link. Yes. All right, so here are the slides. So I'm gonna do answer Susan's, not for me, and then if whoever's still here, actually majority of you are still here. That's the questions. I also want to shout out too as well. I'm giving an event, so this is like intentionally. It was put on during Hacktoberfest. It's an open source contributor summer, and this project, and please suggest tips on how to contribute. I don't know the proper way to link this, but I just answered the please also suggest tips and tricks for beginners to contribute open source. That question I just answered with this link. This is actually an event that we're hosting on Thursday, where we have open source maintainers who will talk about their projects. We'll talk about how you can contribute. And these are actually, hear it from literally the people who are maintaining the projects and find out ways to contribute and join the community that way. That's the purpose of this event. It's not really to do what I'm doing here and like do tips and tricks on GitHub. It's actually to show off projects and then give you concrete ways to contribute to it. So that's what that is. That's honestly what the open source community has really been discovered and built around. That's why we have a Discord. It's for the intention to answer these questions, but not just on one-off events that we have throughout the month. It's actually in an ongoing basis where you can actually sit in the chat and ask questions. So that's the goal there, and that's the goal of the project open source. How do you understand the flow of code logic for that project? Shivam, can you clarify? I'm not really sure. Code logic for that project. Is it code logic for open source? I'm just going to assume that's what you mean. So how would I understand the code logic for this project? And a lot of times what happens is people actually, they explain the structure of the project here in the README. So I don't have a diagram or whatnot, but what I have done is I have a bunch of talks I've given on the project, which would probably be the best way. Let's see if I can find the talk I gave on open source, in which actually explains. Let me see. I have. Oh, I really do not know how to use YouTube. YouTube is the worst. How do I find a playlist? Nope. All right. Oh, you know what I could do? I could just Google open source. There we go. And this will answer the logic of the code because I actually go into detail on how the project's structured using GraphQL. So hopefully that answers your question. So I've explained it publicly in conference talks, and when people have questions about open source, I just send them to that. So that's the goal. It's a great way to kind of show people that this project is not a perfect project. It's not even a project that is useful to a lot of people. Like if it was, this thing would have 1 million users. But because it's literally a project that solves my own problem of contributing open source or contributing to open source, that's why it exists. So there you go. Any other questions? I walked through GitHub Action. I walked through showing how we had the welcome contributor action working. I have quite a few other actions that I leverage to coerce people into contributing. But I don't know how much value you get out of that if most of the questions are sort of how to find your first open source contribution. There are other tools like goodfirstissue.dev, which are literally just, oh, hey, open source, that are just issues for people to contribute to that are good first issues. So I highly recommend that. Dev2 also has a contributors wanted tag, contributors wanted, which is also another great way for you to find projects to contribute to. So literally, here's a post. Who's looking for open source contributors? That is a great place to find first-time contributions. But I would say the best thing that you could do is, oh, it looks like DigitalOcean is providing the slides for me too as well, and the links. I knew there was a chat somewhere, and I just found it. Excellent. So yeah, any other questions that I can actually point people to? Did I finish actually talking through this PR? Let me talk through this PR, then we can sort of wind things down. So this issue was specifically because I wanted a change log for my project. It's a common thing to have when you have release notes. What I have here with CodaQuick, and I've actually chatted with them in the Discord, and then I'll shout out to Philip, who's part of my triage team. He's always first responder to approving things. What they've done is they added the thing that we were looking for, which was the change log. Inside the issue, I had a bunch of options for them to go through, which when I do good first issues, my requirement for any good first issues is actually have a solution directly in the issue itself. Because I want good first issues to be in place. And that's why I have a distinction between Hacktoberfest and good first issues, is I want good first issues to not take a lot of time for folks. I want them to be able to say, I know how to read the issue. I can see that there's a solution here. I can implement it. And that's basically what I did with this issue. And so they've contributed it. They actually added a GitHub action to automate the changelog being creative. They also did something that I've responded about to as well, which is they added some extra stuff that wasn't needed. So going back to the IDE stuff, where someone was asking about adding in the git ignore about specific IDE filtering. I am okay with it, but also this adds an extra level of context, which is my response to them. That folks that aren't familiar with how to contribute to open source in this project now need to know what Husky and commit_sin is, which is a point of friction. And I'm always of the opinion that you should always remove friction from contributions. So I've asked them to remove that friction as well. But that was all the contributions. So most of this will be deleted based on my response back to them. And the biggest thing that they did was they literally just copy and pasted exactly what I said to do, and now we're gonna have change logs in the project. So this is their second contribution. It's not technically their first. Their first contribution was pretty small as well. But my hope is that Code It Quick, I'm not sure if you're listening right now, but my hope is with Code It Quick is that they are ingrained in the community. They're happy to make contributions to a project that everybody's getting value out of. And they're also constantly providing feedback on best ways and best practices on how to contribute. So like, though I wasn't a fan of Husky and Commit Zen, I'm now aware of them and I'm aware of like possible solutions for them. I just don't know if they're actually a good fit here. And I think being able to be available to make this contribution, but also get the feedback, it's been super valuable to me because I've been able to, one, like I'm down to all my issues are actually pretty heavy features at this point. They're all nice to haves for folks. So my hope is that folks that stick around, they'll stick around for dark mode, which we haven't implemented yet. Looks like it's already been claimed. Adding extra features like filtering issue labels, which quite honestly, it is a good first issue. I just haven't quite provided the solution yet. Which, yeah, I haven't done it yet. I think we're actually waiting on some mock-ups that I was going to make. But yeah, if you're interested in chatting with me, it doesn't have to be open source related. It could be open source related. Like as I mentioned, we do have a Discord that we're happy to take you in and answer your questions. We have a community of folks who have done it before, or also we have a lot more people who are brand new. But that's what that community is for. It's just really just to make sure that contributing to open source is less daunting and not as overwhelming. Oh, looks like I never scrolled down. We have other questions. How to understand the code flow logic? I think we did that. I answered with that YouTube video. Does open source help find contributions focused on JavaScript community, or does it have other areas as well? So we don't actually provide the contributions, and I guess I can just show off the Discord if that is helpful to provide context. But no, it's like we do have people who do Python. We have a lot of people who do JavaScript. We do have people who do .NET and C#. It's up to whatever the community brings. So the project itself is JavaScript, but we have this little chat right here called Request for Contributions. So you can see that James is looking for contributions to Maven stack, which I think it's Mongo Ember Vue. I don't know. Mongo Express, Vue, and Node. So that is JavaScript. This VS Code plugin that Clarkio is showing off is actually to be able to code from speech. I don't know what that's written in, to be quite honest. This Earth data stuff, I'm not sure what it's written in. But yeah, this is the channel that folks are just drop in their projects for contributions, which I don't quite remember what all these are, what languages these are. But it's also fair enough to jump in and say, hey, I'm looking for a project in this language, and people will respond. Because there's a lot of knowledge. I know Jay, who's in the community, he does a lot of Python. So all his projects that he looks for contributions is specifically Python. What is the best way to start with GitHub Actions in order to get hands-on experience in DevOps? So I think the best experience would be lab.github.com. And there is a GitHub Action DevOps with GitHub Actions. So if you want to get hands-on experience, I would go through this stuff, which I can do the chat. I'm going to drop it in the chat, which I think you can see now for this course. Next question, how to get involved in a project that uses programming languages, which I know a little bit. I would honestly, I would go back to this. Join it. I think people are sleeping on Discord right now, and I think it's going to be blowing up in the next couple, blowing up in a positive way. I know that's an American slang, but I would say this Discord, like having projects in Discord and accessible to contributors and maintainers to collaborate and have conversations with, hands down the best way. Join the community, follow people on Twitter, ask questions, be a positive and provide value in the community. So, and that's what I'm getting at with the triage team and why I brought that up is that you don't have to contribute code day one. I know there's like pressure to contribute code before the end of the month because of Hacktoberfest, but having something like a triage team and being available to contribute and saying, hey, I don't know how to write this code today, but I can label issues like no one's business. like labeling issues it's a hard problem that people have to do manually. So being able to write automation to label issues would be hands down the best thing that you're doing. You can do that JavaScript, C#, whatever you want. GitHub Actions is pretty flexible to be able to write whatever language you're looking to do. What kind of projects are good for good code newbies? Are good for newbies. I added code newbies in there. Projects are the projects you use. So if you learn React, contribute to a React project. There are plenty of React libraries out there. There's like React Query. There are React animation libraries. The projects you're interested in is going to go further than projects that you're specifically, like if you're just looking to contribute for the sake of contributing, because you might have saw a Hacktoberfest label on somewhere, then it's going to be much harder. But if you happen to already be using React Query in a project, then it's going to be way easier to, oh, they only have 7 issues. Man, they're on top of it. But I would say adding issues would be super appreciated too as well. And I think what a lot of people do is they have all contributors here. So if you just open an issue, like you get your name, you might not get yourself on this box, but you'll get yourself here on this box. So highly recommend that. Projects you're using currently are projects you aspire to use. So I didn't talk about this, but did I open that? No. Oh, you know what? I can actually go to my Dev.to post. So I have a Dev.to post where I talk about my first contribution to the GitHub CLI. Now, this is the project that I contributed to mainly because I wanted to use Go. So I was using this project, which is the GitHub CLI, and they have the Easter egg, which is the credits. I did a whole post on this, which you should definitely check it out and find out my story there. But I don't write Go on a regular basis. I wanted to write Go. So I found an opportunity to make a feature. I opened up an issue and said, hey, this is the issue I actually opened up and said, hey, I have a feature. Like, would you like it? They came back and said, yeah, this sounds good. And then they actually gave me the answer of how to actually contribute it because they weren't going to do it because they didn't have time. So then I was able to make that contribution. And within 2 weekends, this is the video I recorded to show off what I did. Within 2 weekends, I was able to contribute to it. And 1, I was able to write Go, but 2, I was able to have a contribution in an open source project that I kind of knew the people when they contributed. Actually, never met them prior. What is the commit through? What is the commit through email chain mean? I read that in the. Okay, that's a deep question. So you read that on the Linux kernel. So what does it mean? Yeah, so I don't know about Linux, but I know about V8. So V8 is a project that is not actually on GitHub. It's a mirror. And I know this because I have a contribution that I'm going to be making pretty soon to this. But you can see that this says mirror, and it's very clear. The Linux kernel as well. And I have it on the ready because I'm actually following the Linux kernel. Oh, you know, I deleted it. No, here it is. Here's the Linux. Here's the project. Oh, man, it broke. It won't work. Anyway, I'm actually watching it because it breaks my entire project because it's so big. So it's an issue that's not open yet. If anybody wants to figure out how to manage large amount of data, there's an opportunity there. But what I'm getting at is that the V8. So V8 is the runtime that's powered Node.js, which I guess we only have 2 minutes left. So I'll wind this down. This will be the last question. It's actually hosted here on Gerrit, which is a whole other platform. And the way to interface is actually through Google email. So the Linux kernel, they don't interface on GitHub. They actually contribute and on GitHub, on Git commit message. And this is like way outside of left field, but I happen to know this answer. They actually have a mail message that you can append to your Git commits. And those Git commits, these email messages that you can add, that's how they do contributions. I don't know how that works because I only just learned about this in the last couple weeks. But yeah, the way they do contributions. So I'd say the Linux kernel is not the best entry-level project to contribute to be quite honest. It takes a lot of like structural knowledge, where if you're just trying to learn how to use GitHub today, like put on your seatbelt because learning how to contribute to the Linux kernel is going to take way more effort. GitHub is a platform to actually sort of make it a little more easier to interface. It provides a GUI, but also provides a very nice experience for the end user to contribute to a project's work. So I don't know what the actual link it is. but there's a mail message that's attached to your Git commits that you're able to do special things with through email. So that's how that works. It's obviously not well documented, or I'm just not searching for the right thing. But hope it answered your question. I just hit time, so I'm gonna go ahead and say goodbye. I appreciate everybody who came through. Definitely reach out to me, let me know on Twitter, or inside my Discord that I shared a couple times, whether you found value with this. And I wish you a happy Hacktoberfest. And yeah, talk to you soon.